All right, well, welcome to everyone joining us both in person and online to our session tonight, a conversation exploring the intersection between future forests and young forest stewards, hosted by the 15th World Forestry Congress. So this is meant to be a fireside chat, which means that we're going to have two-way dialogue, meaning we will be reliant on you, the participants, to ask questions, to engage in conversation, and to be critical when conversing with our panelists here today. My name is Dana Collins, and I will be moderating today's session with Khalil Walji as we chat with 6 exceptional panelists, 5 in person and 1 online. Hi, Amina. To introduce myself, I am the managing director of the Juniper Collective, and I come from Canada's West Coast. I've worked across academia, the not-for-profit sector, and industry. My career has been anything but linear. More recently, I've fallen into the more social side of forestry, working with forest industry and forest companies to create more inclusive cultures where everyone feels valued and respected, and we can reap the benefits of diversity. And more recently, I was actually just nominated or announced as one of Canada's 100 most powerful women as a result of challenging the status quo, particularly when it comes to female empowerment in male-dominated industries. I'll hand it over to Khalil to introduce himself.
I certainly don't have as many credentials as that. That's impressive. Well, thanks so much, Dana. A big welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the session, especially, I know it's a session that's later in the evening, but we do appreciate your presence. Can I just start by saying what a pleasure it is to be here in person? I think we should never take this for granted again. It's a real pleasure, but also a very warm welcome to our participants and panelists who are also joining us online. Indeed, my name is Khalil Walji. I just made a career change. So I was with FAO for about 4 years and I've just recently joined C4ECRAF, which is a research for development agency. I work as the co-coordinator of the Landscapes for Our Future program. I'm a proud IFSA, the International Forestry Students Association alumni, and also a young professional. So I'm really thrilled to be here and co-moderating with Dana and to be discussing and exploring sort of the career trajectories and some of the experiences of our esteemed panelists with the input of you all.
So the intention of tonight's session is to set the stage for another session that's happening on Thursday, which I encourage all of you to attend starting at 9 a.m. called The Future is Now, Investing in Young Forestry Professionals in Career Development, which is hosted by 4YP or Forest Young Professionals. Tonight's fireside chat, however, will be exploring the diversity of roles within the forest sector, which I'm sure many of you are well acquainted in. We're all working in various facets of the forest sector, as well as exploring and shedding light on how forested landscapes are lived experiences and regional ecosystems influence management, influence priorities, and influence career trajectories.
Yeah, and also to emphasize one more time that this is really intended to be a dialogue between yourselves and the panelists and those online. And you'll see Dana and I will actually be sitting in the crowd with you all just to kind of give us a bit more of an intimate experience. So we've set up the room in sort of a semicircle, at least the first few rows. So with social distancing in mind, for those who are sitting at the back, if you would like to come a little bit closer, of course, no pressure. But yeah, we're relying on your guys' questions. We're relying on the questions of those online. We've also done a very good job, Youth for Nature and the other colleagues and partner institutions who are putting on this event did a very nice job promoting. And so we've got a number of questions on Mentimeter that we'll also be posing towards the panel. So I guess in a nutshell, the more you guys speak, the less that we have to. So we'll just encourage as many questions from the floor.
So before we jump into this dialogue with our panelists, just a few housekeeping items. Today, our panelists will be speaking in English, although Esteban might bust out some Spanish, we'll see. There will be live translation in both Korean and Spanish. And for those joining us online, firstly, hi. Secondly, you can click on the globe icon on the bar of your Zoom and change the audio channel and listen in the language of your choice. Lastly, this session will be recorded. All right, I think we're gonna join the crowd and get started here. Yep.
Great, to get started, I guess Dana and I, of course, are moderating, but I think we wanted to just start and get everything going by sharing a little bit about what forests mean to us. I think it's a very personal thing. So for myself, I've been a forest professional. I've worked in forestry for the past 5 years since graduation. And although it's a place that I use as a living laboratory, a place where I go for work, on a more personal level, forest is really the place that I go to get away from work. So it's a place that I run when I was living in Vancouver, also on the west coast of Canada. That's where I would go to get away from my thesis when I didn't want to look at my document anymore, when I had chapters that were due. I used it really as a refuge. And that's continued on in my work. I use it as a place for health, for fitness, but also to just get away from the grind of daily life. So for me, forests really represent a refuge.
Thanks. Yeah, as mentioned, I come from Canada. It's the third most forested country in the world. So forest exists as a pillar of economic prosperity from where I come from. And like Khalil mentioned, it's also an element that's like woven into our cultural identity, whether it be through hiking or camping. I do want to note, however, that because they're managed by registered professional foresters, it's being done in a sustainable way. So to me, forests are one of the key elements to help fight climate change, to reach our sustainable development goals. And I do want that to be stressed tonight, that it is part of it is key to our strategies and moving forward in a sustainable way. Oh, yeah, sure. Okay, so we'll get started with our panel then. Amina, we're gonna call upon you first. So if you can unmute on your end, and we'll get started with planting the seeds and getting to know our panelists. Amina, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. Thank you.
Perfect. So I was wondering if you could tell the audience more about yourself and what forestry looks like for you and how you interact with the forests in Kenya.
Oh, thank you, Dana and Khalil. Hi, everyone. Sorry I couldn't be there physically, but to introduce myself, my name is Amina Aden Maalim. I am a female research scientist working with the Kenya Forestry Research Institute, known as KEFRI. I have 7 years of working experience in the forest sector. I am based in the northeastern Kenya, and I mostly work in the dryland part of the country. And I have both local and international research experience. And unique to me is I am the only female forestry researcher in the region, as well as the only female forestry researcher of Somali descent in Kenya and Somalia. My expertise is agroforestry and sustainable rural development. And I have a master's in agroforestry and an undergrad, a bachelor's in agroforestry and rural development. And I plan to do a PhD in climate change and adaptation, focusing on the triple nexus of gender, forestry, and climate. And additionally, I'm also on the IU4 task force member that is looking at transforming forest landscapes for future climates and human well-being. And since I also have that unique, being the only female forest researcher, I'm also on the forefront of women mentorship in STEM fields especially in my region. And to answer your question, despite the conventional definition of forestry being known as the science, craft, or practice of planting, managing, and caring for forests, I personally see it as a profession or a space that interacts with plants, soils, biodiversity, and people or communities. And I interact with the forests in Kenya through conducting research in them and the communities that are living in or close to the forest, as most of us know them as the forest adjacent communities. Since I work in the dryland forests located in the country, I conduct multidisciplinary research that first of all assesses the situation or the condition of the forest in terms of the usage, the conservation and management. And by doing that, we also map out the resources to identify areas of critical action response. We identify the degraded hotspots, and we consequently design rehabilitation or restoration technologies and implement them. And we also take inventory of the current plants available in the forest, and this include both the indigenous and the exotic plants. And this is done so that we know the current conservation status and gaps, and also make recommendations on how to conserve those that are going extinct or are critically endangered. And despite this being brought by climate change and related shocks, I have personally developed a customized extension guidebook that contains priority high-value plants for the restoration of the degraded arid landscapes in Kenya. And this book is going to help preempt on the UN Decade Declaration on Ecosystem Restoration. Since times are changing, I also am very much interested in the knowledge management front, where I work with communities in trying to, complement my scientific knowledge with their indigenous knowledge in terms of restoration. And so that not only in plants, but also for water harvesting technology, so that we have successful restoration of the degraded forests and rangelands. And I also work with other experts, including agriculture officers, water experts, climate experts in enhancing customized policies that promote sustainable forest management. And in addition to this, I also work with community groups in enhancing participatory forest management to ensure that forests are intact for the future generations to benefit from them too. And in our country, we promote all avenues for ensuring our government's policy in 10% forest cover. And this involves my expertise of agroforestry, agroecology, so that we enhance food and nutrition security of the communities, as well as enhancing theirs and their systems' resilience to climate change. And we also disseminate forest technologies that are really helpful in ensuring that the forests provide what they are provided for when they are very much taken care of. Thank you all.
Thank you, Amina. And firstly, I just want to applaud you on being the only woman that's forging a path in that sector. I know how difficult that can be, and you're creating a space for other women in doing so. So thank you for doing that. It's absolutely commendable what you're doing. The other thing I want to say is, way to kick things off and describe the diversity of roles that exist within forestry. I heard you touch on climate, indigenous knowledge, knowledge exchange, gender, endemic species, and the list goes on and on and on. So you're really speaking the truth when we're talking about diversity in forestry. I did want to ask you a question and almost a follow-up on those priority spots or hot spots. In identifying those, firstly, what do those look like for you? What are these hotspot or priority areas that you're identifying? And in identifying them, what effect has that had on the landscape or in terms of long-term sustainability for communities or for the environment?
This is why the knowledge issue is very important. I work with the pastoral communities, I work with the farmers. So since I am also I personally call myself a nomadic pastoralist by lifestyle, we identify the areas that are overgrazed, and the area is also subjected to recurrent droughts and floods. So we try to see which areas have been subjected to those degradations, and then with the experts, we tend to map which vegetations have been there, how is the situation now, and then we tend to integrate the two knowledges, and then see if whatever restoration approaches were designed has improved them, and then we tend to compare the situation before and the situation afterwards, so that we see if we've made critical restoration. And also a good thing is we are also developing frameworks to see, because a lot of money is being pumped in restoration projects, but how are they being monitored? Are they really addressing the restoration needs and the priority areas for restoration? So those frameworks will kind of monitor and evaluate how these restoration projects are performing on the ground, and are they reflecting on the objectives and the goals that they were set for in the beginning.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Amina. Karibu tena to the session as a panelist again. Unfortunately, you couldn't make it, but I count that you and I can get together back in Nairobi and continue chatting. I want to shift the dialogue to our next panelist, to Kim Carstensen, who's the Director General of the Forest Stewardship Council. Kim, could you share a little bit with the audience about really what your role consists of, and how did you find yourself in that role?
Well, embarrassingly, I'm not a forester. I'm really worried about sort of admitting that. I mean, it may help you to know that all of my predecessors were in fact foresters, and everything that we just heard about what a forester does actually fits with what I do and where I come from. I started studying biology, and then I combined that later and became a sociologist. So I sort of am trained in the interlinkages between humans and nature, which is very much what forestry is also about. And increasingly, what I have sort of wanted to focus on is how we can make certification as a tool relevant for local communities, indigenous peoples around the world. Because many of these people come to forests not for the timber necessarily, they come to forests for all sorts of other values that the forest has in terms of production, in terms of spirituality, in terms of watershed management, in terms of all sorts of things that are very important for them. And increasingly, I think that is what we all want to see be maintained in the world's forests. And that is what we as a system and I as a person work for in order to steer FSC, Forest Stewardship Council, in that direction strategically, and in order to make sure that we build partnerships with other organizations that can move the world in that direction.
Thanks very much. Kim, well, first of all, on behalf of those of us who are foresters, we forgive you. It's okay. But no, I think your description of sort of your career progression is really interesting. I think it certainly represents the broader trends in the forest sector, coming from historically more of a timber extraction kind of sector, and now becoming much more participatory, with entry points for many, many more different career professionals that don't necessarily start their careers in forestry per se. As trained foresters, but I think that diversity is so important for the sector. So I think most of us, when we hear FSC, or I think the image that I have in my head is when the pieces of paper that I print things on has that little forest check mark. So FSC, of course, is a certification body, but with your background as a sociologist and sort of trying to incorporate more of that kind of people and forest dynamics, can you share a little bit how that practically manifests in your job on a day-to-day level, how FSC works with communities to ensure that FSC is a bit easier and maybe less expensive?
I mean, our background and what we do sort of as a starting point for our work is that we convene stakeholders, environmental stakeholders, social stakeholders, and economic stakeholders in setting standards for what does responsible forestry actually look like. What is a well-managed forest? What does it look like? It's not the same in Denmark as it is in Brazil. So how do we make sure that we get the people together? The most important thing is to actually make that convening happen and make the acceptability of standards across very different opinions, and people are fighting inside our system for their own opinions, but to get that to work, that's what is really most important. Increasingly, we're trying to get a voice for you could say, the underprivileged peoples. We've created what we call an FSC Indigenous Foundation. It's placed in Panama, indigenous-led, indigenous-governed, to help indigenous peoples organizations actually build capacity themselves and for the benefit of indigenous peoples around the world, because they need a genuine expression of their interests. We can't do that for them, but they have to do that themselves. So that's something we have helped create. We do the same with workers. Workers' rights are crucially important. Women's rights are crucially important. So all of these things are increasingly coming into the work and are then part of what we see in these certified products. And the water here is FSC certified. I mean, not the water itself. We don't certify water, but what holds it together is certified. So that's what we're doing.
Thanks, Kim. Always nice to hear how we're creating more equitable systems for folks to access tools to become more sustainable, including certification schemes. Ron, we're going to move on to you next. So we note that you have also worked in the forest sector space for over 10 years through RECOC TC. Could you tell the audience what your role consists of and how you found yourself in that role?
Well, thanks a lot for the question, Dana. I come a little bit opposite from Ken. I am forester, and over 4 decades of experience in the social forestry.
But who's counting, right?
Yeah, so you put me in the right person talking with Ken. I will say that I'd like to share my story. Actually, I have to confess, when Vinamra invited me to join this panel, I feel, are you sure that you would like to invite the old forester to join in the youth kind of discussion? I feel a little bit being like minorities of the of the communities here, but anyhow, I can share with you my story. As I said, I started with the forestry degree, and I am the wildlife ecologist. working as the wildlife research, being in the bush, staying in the bush by myself, being in the blind, starting from 5 a.m. to 8 p.m. by myself. So you can imagine that what I see, forest, tree, wildlife, that's what I see. Yeah, because that is my passion. When I was young, I see the natures. I like to be with nature. I like to associate myself with the nature. And then suddenly my work allowed me to talk to local people. Wow, that clicked like this. Well, I thought that I know a lot about forestry, but when I talk to local people, wow, how come they talk on their own language, thinking about the forest, the nature, how well they love the nature, how well they use the nature by own language. It clicked my mind to think, hey, am I doing the right thing, being in the bush by myself, getting lost by myself without compass? No, I'm talking about forest, how to make connection to human life. Yeah, if I continue working as the wildlife researcher, I will be in the bush as always. But after I have a series of talks with local people, then I suddenly realized that if you like to sustain the forest resource, we have to talk about people and how we can recognize the knowledge and norms that they have used. I'm sure many of you have heard about in the past the common perception among the forester. Who destroyed the forest? The poor, people. That is common perception that probably you have heard. But suddenly when you talk to those local people, you suddenly will understand that why they are working and using the forest for their living. Yeah. So what I like to say is that, well, I end up with my professional career as the strategic advisor for the organization called RECOF, not RECOF TC, RECOF, okay. The Regional Community Forestry Training Center for Asia and the Pacific. I'm working a lot over the last 40 years to advocate the role of local people, empowering them to enjoy their sustainable forest management practices. I train a number of government officers, private sectors, NGOs to understand more the values and the potentials, how the communities can manage their forests on their own benefit. It's similar to what Nick mentions about, yeah, but we work to kind of different streams. Yeah, but I'm sure we are talking about the same, talking about sustainable forest management by getting local people at the center. So that's why I end up with this career. What I like to say is that forests cannot stand alone. You have to be aware of other development sector. So forests get influence from other land use, and how can we recognize that and then make sure that forests can be managed under the interaction with other interventions, and also ensuring that the local people have voice to say.
Fantastic. It's an interesting trajectory that you had. We have a lot of folks, and I have friends and colleagues who have worked in the bush their whole life, and they work in the bush because they enjoy that and don't love working with people. And then when they come out and talk to the people, they're often met with these perceptions that they didn't believe existed. I wonder then, have you come across some interesting perceptions, and how do you combat these, like whether it be misinformation, misalignment of values? I do believe that natural resources are intrinsically contested, and so we have conflicting values. How do you reconcile those and work to create a common space where folks can come together?
Right, because over the last decade, I worked a lot in terms of building capacities, creating the mutual understanding, how the people should be in center of the sustainable forest management. So I have the same questions as you asked, the state member asked, okay, well, how can you ensure the local people have capacities to do so? Well, I share many good examples that there are ethnic group in Thailand, Myanmar. They have a lot of folk song, folk story, yeah, that capture the way how they use the forest in the sustainable way. And then that written or sang in the local language. So I put that in and then ask them to interact with the researcher, scientists, or even the policymaker. I bring them down to make the visit, and then we make a lot of successes. We brought ambassadors, yeah, from different countries to visit the indigenous people site, and then let them interact directly with those people. And then, wow, I am impressed that the ambassadors, policymakers, shift their mind and start to think how to allow local people to involve in the policy reform and creating the enabling environment for those people to talk more. So I think our roles in the organization, we try to bridge the gap and correct the common perception that we had so far. Yeah, we cannot pin down local people are bad, not as we have thought that.
Thank you so much, Ron. Actually, the contrary, the local people, I think evidence has shown that when you put their resources in their own hands, they manage it significantly better. And I think it's a matter of trying to harness local solutions that are culturally appropriate and work together to scale them. So thank you so much for your perspectives. I know maybe when you were invited, you thought, you know, this is a young person's panel, but I assure you we did our due diligence and we made sure you guys are all young at heart before we invited you. So moving from the sort of mid to late career professionals, moving right down to the beginning now, some young professionals. I want to turn to Esteban. So Esteban, you're one of the winners of the World Forestry Congress blog competition. I'd like to ask you, what makes you passionate about engaging others in the forest sector through communications media? And how does this play a role in your day-to-day work, if it does?
Buenos días con todos y todas. Good morning. I'm going to speak in English. So I think I'm in the perfect spot because he's not a forester and he's a forester, and I don't know if I am or I am not a forester. I studied environmental engineer. I am 25 years old. And well, I don't know, because I think I work like in the middle spot in the link between the forest and the social projects. I think that's an open space that we need to cover. Not so many persons are working on these comprehensive approaches to develop this. It could be like advances, but well, I'm going to tell you more about me. I work on 6 rural communities, and one time when I was in Mashpi, that is in the Ecuadorian Choco Andino forest, one neighbor just asked me like, hello, who are you? And I don't know if he meant to ask like literally who I am, but then I just like think like, really, who am I? I am not, Esteban. I am not environmental engineer, because there are a lot of people that are called Esteban and are also environmental engineers. And then, well, thinking, I realized I could be like described maybe like with 2 words: bridge and mirror. And it works with the question. I think coming here is a transformation. I think traveling, it is like a mix of all living experiences, and not just a transformation of body, but also in mind. I am a bridge because I connect my country and all that I learned in the communities with the things that I learned here. And I am also a mirror because I reflect all the love that people gives me when I meet them here. And I think that's beautiful. And then maybe an approach to my work. Well, there I am also a bridge because I don't have like the perfect solutions. I don't tend to get to a place and tell them what to do or what do they need. I think they know it. They just need like a little push. And that's basically the work I develop with my team in Ecuador. We go to a community and we just like ask the questions. We identify what are the problems with the knowledge and the pluricultural wisdom of the communities, but we have to know that these communities are not indigenous communities. So it is not like the connection that they have built between generation and generation. It is more than they had to move to that place, and they are learning about different places. They may be coastal people, they may be Amazonic people, but they now are in the same spot. So in this mixture, they are kind of lost. We need to boost them so they can find their common identity. And with that, we just helps them as a tool. We don't have the solution, but we can make that these people with their potentialities build their vision towards sustainable development. That's kind of the things that I do.
Thank you so much, Esteban. I think the word bridge is really something that I picked up there. I think you're a bridge both ways, right? And it's a pleasure for us to have you here. You've brought the message of your community to the World Forestry Congress. And of course, you'll take your learnings back to the community as well. I wonder if I could call you a poet, because the way you speak is very inspirational. And in reading your blog for the World Forestry Congress, it really is a fantastic piece, and I would recommend that everyone here go and read it. It's deeply meaningful, it's poetic, and I think it resonated with me because you also talk about forests being a refuge. So I wanted to ask you then, Esteban, to you or also to your community, as a representative of your community, what do forests mean to you? And just before you start, if you'd like to speak in Spanish, we do have translation, but however you'd like to speak.
I thought to answer this in Spanish, but I don't think so because the translation shouldn't be as good as my Spanish. But yeah, what forest mean to me? You said that for you it's a getaway for work, but I think for me it's literally going for work. And as I said, not just work for my body, but also for my mind. I think well, in my country, we have like a lot of medicinal plants, and they have this wisdom, and it's kind of ineffable. You cannot explain it in words, but maybe you can live in the experience to understand. Yeah, for me, it is a place of peace. It is a place of wisdom. It is where I can order my thoughts. It is when I can learn about my mistakes. I don't know where, but I can find the solutions, and I can grow step by step about certain things. It is not easy, I must tell, but yeah, I think it represents a lot to me. As vegetarian, as environmental engineer, I had always built the path of sustainability and to love towards nature, towards all life. I think we are part of a whole living being. We're all water. We are all in a cycle. So yeah, I think it's a place, a magical place. And I don't know, it just makes me happy to be there and to work there and to have the opportunity to feel the things that I feel when I'm there.
Thank you. I think you left us with a lot to reflect on, especially that last part, and that if we can see ourselves as part of those systems as opposed to apart from, so being part of water and earth, then that's when we can find these nature-based solutions. We're going to switch gears here, and we're going to talk about numbers, something that terrifies me. It haunts me in my dreams. We're going to move to Hyunju. You are a data analyst and support forest governance and trade. What does a forest look like to you, a data analyst?
So I think I'm the weirdo in this room. So in my world, forests appear in numbers. I'm working for a project called FLECT Independent Market Monitoring. It's called FLECT IMM. It's managed by ITTO, International Tropical Timber Organization. I'm not sure if you're familiar with FLECT. It's an EU initiative to tackle deforestation caused by illegal logging. basically. And EU has been enforcing the law to ban any imports of illegally sourced timber products coming into its member states. And it's been building some partnerships, sort of bilateral trading, how to call it, deals with some exporting countries to ensure that the products from those countries are safe, the deforestation safe, like technically. But so in our project, Flag Tea IMM, it's we are trying to monitor the impact of Flag Tea partnership measures on the global market, as global timber market. And me, as a data analyst, my role is to find insights from those numbers. So if numbers is just there, if you don't see any meanings from it, it's just that numbers. But what I'm trying to do is, those policymakers and businesses have questions. So they want to find some answers to improve their decisions. So what I'm doing is finding the answers, trying to find the answers from the numbers and provide some data-driven information to support their decisions. And so I deal with a large amount of data. So I process them, I analyze them, and I try to see how I can visualize in an effective way so that people can not be terrified and effectively, delivering the key messages that the data is trying to say. And I also make some web applications like data dashboard so that people can easily explore what they want to see from the data. Yeah.
Thank you. You've made it less scary, and I rely on people like you to relay those key messages so I can understand what any of that means. I'm curious how you got into this though, and how you found meaning in numbers, and what propelled you in that direction?
Yeah, I don't know, the mysterious power. Yeah, it has been really, really random. I studied forestry in my bachelor. So I was part of IFSA. I was a very active member. Yeah. And then I studied ecosystem services. I'm not sure if this concept is familiar, but basically it's trying to quantify the value of ecosystems so that people who are so into numbers can understand, or money or businesses can understand the true value of nature. So I think that was maybe the beginning of this path, because I found it very attractive to how to say, make something vague clear. So yeah, I think we all here, the people in this room, already know how valuable the forests are, but I don't know why some other people don't see those values. But I was trying to see I was trying to work with the numbers so that those people can also understand in their own languages. So yeah, and then I got this job just because while I was studying forestry, I was so into statistics, and I was using some coding and so on. So that skill has been useful for a certain project with this ITTO. And then now I'm here.
Thanks so much, Angie. I really love the diversity of not only the panel, but of hearing your stories. I mean, you said 3 really scary words there at the end. You said data, you said statistics, you said another word that I'm forgetting now. But anyways, thank you for your
web application.
Yeah. To finalize the panel, we're going to move to Davia. So Davia, you're joining us from the Jamaica Forestry Department as the Senior Director of the Strategic and Corporate Planning Branch. Wow. So could you just tell us a little bit more about your role, what it consists of, and how you found yourself in this position?
Okay, thank you, and good evening to everyone. It's a pleasure to share on this panel. Like my colleague, I am not a forester, but I am a testament to the fact that you can work with the forest sector or in the forest sector with varying educational backgrounds. I have done a lot of technical work in forestry, but my strategic planning area, I focus on forest policy and forest planning. And so to me, what the forest looks like is sustainability. What the forest looks like is long-term planning. I have worked over the years on the development of a 10-year forest sector plan for my island home. And while I'm not into numbers, I have to use the numbers. And so work in terms of data collection and analysis, natural resource valuation, that information drives policy. And that is a big part of what I do. We work to secure funding to support the forest sector as well as to drive and build capacity for the sector, because as a small island, we have challenges where that is concerned, and sustainable management of our forest resources require us to creatively plan for and have policies that support the development of the sector. And so a big part of what I do relates with that and around that. And so an important part of our work as well is reporting on the state of our forests. So a lot of my work is with the United Nations Forest Forum, with the FAO, where we produce these country reports that sort of tells what is happening in the country, tells the story of forestry in the country. And so I work a lot with that as well.
Yeah, wonderful. I mean, I think, so I guess, would you serve as the FAO FRA focal point as well?
Well, I'm one of.
You're one
we
of,
have
yeah.
a team, yes.
Yeah, I think we could dig into that more about, sort of the reporting burden, especially with government institutions and limited resources. But I won't ask you about that because I know that's a whole nother dialogue. I actually wanted to speak to you about your work on developing a vision for the forests of your country. And I think that's such an interesting process. Could you speak a little bit to how open, how participatory was it, and what were some of those steps that you guys had to take to really get buy-in from the public as well? Right.
So from the strategic planning, we had to be strategic. From the strategic planning perspective, we had to start with our stakeholders. And so it was a process, a 3 to 4 year process. We received substantial help from the US Forest Service to help us do our stakeholder consultations. And we talked earlier, other panelists talked about, what the forest means to the communities. And that was important because in Jamaica, we have what we call local forest management committees. And these are persons who live and pretty much depend on the forest resources. And so we had to have extensive consultations with them over this 3-year period to sort of get their insight on what sustainable management of the forest sector means to them and what they would want to see in a long-term vision and plan for Jamaica. Things like our FSC certification was something that came out. We saw as well where a lot of our community groups wanted to engage more in what we call non-timber forest product services. And so we had to include activities that looked at building capacity of our communities to be able to sustainably harvest and make use of our non-timber forest products. And so the consultation process was extensive, but it bore a lot of fruit. We had various iterations that we had to then take back to the communities, take back to the public. We, of course, have our private landowners. In Jamaica, the majority of our forests are privately owned. And so engaging the private sector was critical for any kind of vision or plan for the country where the forest is concerned.
Fantastic. I wonder if that will come up in some of our discussions afterwards. It seems like everyone's been involved in meaningful consultation. And what does that look like in practice, I think is a golden question as well. I do want to thank everyone for eloquently describing what a forest looks like where you live and work. And I think we've certainly demonstrated that this is a very diverse sector to be working in, to be growing in, to be thriving in. This does conclude our planting the seeds portion of our session, and now we're going to move into the growing the roots by moving into our Ask Me Anything question period. So as we move into this question period, I would like to remind everyone to post your questions through the Mentimeter poll, or if you're online in Zoom, you can do it through the chat box. And then if you're in the room, you can just ask your questions here. The idea is that, again, this is an open dialogue that's really meant to be somewhat informal. informal. We kind of want to break down those barriers of what formal conversations look like and really kickstart a meaningful conversation between our panelists and all of you, and even Khalil and I. So maybe we can open it up. Oh, it looks like we do have one on. Do you want me to throw this one out, or do you want to? Okay, so this one is a bit of a deep question, and so it's on the big screen here, but I will read it out loud. Who is accountable for ensuring effective engagement of youth and new professionals? What are the larger forestry companies doing to measure effective engagement? This is an interesting question because we all understand, I think we're all here because we recognize and value the contributions of youth. But how do we ensure it's being implemented on the ground and that those who are employing youth are truly valuing them? Does anybody want to kickstart the conversation? Ron, I see. Yeah, this is a tough question. Thanks, Ron.
Well, probably I can answer the first part, but not the second part, because the companies, the largest forestry company, I think is quite various, continent by continent. Well, I think I would say everyone has to be accountable, including all of us in this room and also checking online. And also among the youth, when I mentioned about the youth, it's not only about like the graduate student, but I'm counting even starting from the later primary school student, secondary school student. But how can we incentivize them to enjoy the nature and learn more what the forest would look like? Well, I'm sure when you were young, when you talk about forest, it's about the dirty place, seeing something, not pleasure, or see only the green and bird and wildlife that you see. But I think the forest is not about those. It's about environment. You can see forest in the urban area, in the city, like so. I'm sure you can see the park just next to the temple. Yeah. So the forest is not only about those that make you dirty, I would say. So we have to change that perception. So meaning that everyone have to be accountable to allow youth to enjoy. Yeah, I would repeat, enjoy, not feel a little bit intimidating or having negative impression about the dirty place, as I mentioned. So meaning enjoy the nature, enjoy the forest. And then when they enjoy, then realize that they have to take roles. Yeah, the opportunities for among all of us, among the professional officers who are working here, to create opportunities for them to engage.
Thanks very much, Ron. Kim, do you want to have a go as well?
Yes, probably us old guys who should say something now. I mean, from my perspective, I think the most important thing for youth is to take responsibility and to take opportunity, because I think the opportunity is there. I mean, you get invited to meetings like this, right? You get the opportunity to actually express yourself, and you do it, which I think is absolutely great. And I think your obligation is to express yourself. Our obligation then is to listen. And that's sort of the other side of the coin. For us as an organization, we have not had a focus on youth up till now. We probably felt ourselves to be youthful in the sense that we are a new invention, but now we're over 30 years old. We're getting out of the youth segment, right? Getting into the middle age segment, and we need some youth. Many of our members were founding members back in 1994. They are now fossils, right? Dinosaurs, don't quote me. But they need some new inspiration. And I think we're ready for that. We're open to it. And I think the same is true for many of the companies around the world who maybe are not doing this at this point in time, but I think they would be open to actually listen if there is a voice to listen to. So I think that would be the biggest new step that needs to be taken.
Great, thanks so much, Kim. Yeah, certainly the responsibility falls on everyone's shoulders, obviously, for us to engage and attend these sorts of meetings, attend even local community meetings on forests, whether it's the park outside our window, whether it's sort of a broader engagement as well. And then for the organizations to create that space for not only youth. I think youth is one of the marginalized voices that need more space, but I think in that diversity of voices comes innovation. And I think that's the real driver behind it. While we get the next question up on Mentimeter, if there's anyone in the room here who'd like to ask a question, please, you can come up.
Thank you. I'm Abdullah from Bangladesh. So as you heard about Bangladesh, you might heard about the Rohingya crisis. So they're living on a area which was a forest before, but now around 1 million refugees are living there. So they are destroying the whole places. I would say it's both an humanitarian crisis and an environmental crisis. So if we think about the long-term solution, then it might be a geopolitical solution where all the countries must become and find a solution. But there isn't any solution from the political parties or the different countries to repatriate them or do anything. But from youth perspective, to restore the nature, like that place is involved with so many things, like it's connected with marine ecosystem, it connected with wildlife, it connected with the people living in there. So from youth perspective, what you think we can do for it? Thank you.
Yeah, Esteban, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think the first thing that we do in a community when we go it's to identify if there is like a structured community in there, because sometimes there are a lot of conflicts in a space that you have to tackle. So you cannot work with a community that is not together. And I think sometimes you can make them, like you can unify them. I don't know how to say it, but you can make some approaches to them with some projects like, for example, we have this community called La Delicia in the Chucandino forest, and it is a complex territory because they have mistrust on us, for example, in first stage, and a lot of capital because they go out all the professionals to the city. There is a lot of migration, and they have not enough resources, neither economic or in work. So what we are doing there is starting to make recreational projects that it doesn't cost a lot. There is like what you can share, or what the people that starts making these workshops could share. For example, I don't know, I can make contact and share with the people, and then you start working with what they think they can share, and then with these people that you know, you can then start knowing about the problems you have, and then starts about knowing the potentialities the people have, and just step by step tackling solutions with the people you have together then.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, and I feel like throughout our dialogue thus far, we've touched on this idea that we cannot separate people from nature. It is so deeply intertwined, and we see that readily when crises erupt. The question then becomes who's responsible for fixing or for alleviating the issues that we find there. And that's where it gets so challenging. And these climate crises and climate refugees, this is not going to be a unique issue. These are things that we're going to have to really turn our minds to moving forward, because it's something that's going to continue to progress.
Yeah, well, I think I cannot really direct the answer from the specific conflict that you mentioned. Yeah, it's a little bit political sensitive for the organization that I come from, but I can share with you some of the conflict case between the multiple stakeholders using the land. Well, probably you know about the peat swamp ecosystem. In some countries, they perceive the peat swamp as the waste area that no productive anymore. So meaning the government like to convert the peat swamp into something economic. Well, that become an issue because the local people using the peat swamp for daily life, collecting a number of forest products or fishery products and so on. what we are doing is that we develop and working with the local school in the area, and bring in the program. It's called environmental education program. The program is not about peat swamp, but we bring students to learn about mathematics, physics, chemistry, biology. Yeah. So it's not really about ecosystem of the peat swamp itself, but we use the forest as the mean, yeah, to communicate about those subjects. So then they realize that the peat swamp is not about peat swamp itself. It related to other basic subjects that have to learn, like mathematics or art or physics or chemistry. So that is the way how we engage with the youth people.
Fantastic, thank you. Maybe we'll go back to a question online. Is this the one? Okay. Okay, interesting. As forest activities are often linked to increased emissions and biodiversity loss, what role can young foresters play in addressing the ecological crisis we face? I say this is interesting because I work in a sector where we pride ourselves on sustainable forest management, where you know, emissions and biodiversity loss is something that we're actively trying to avoid, and through practices we're in many cases are bettering ecosystems to ensure that we're leaving them in a better place than they are today. But I would like to bring this to the panel. What role can young foresters play in the ecological crisis? Yeah, Kim, this is a good starting point for you.
Well, I mean, from my perspective, that there is already a paradigm shift ongoing, in the sense that forestry as we knew it 20, 30 years ago as an extractive industry, I think is waning and becoming less sort of acceptable. And we are seeing much more sort of a holistic approach to forestry, where it also counts what the climate effects are, also counts what the biodiversity effects are, the social effects, et cetera, et cetera. And I see an increasing interest in that. Maybe also in some cases by a division of land, where you create more high productive forest areas or plantation areas, and then leave other areas to more, you could say, community utilization, where you focus more on non-timber forest products or the biodiversity and climate effects than the timber production per se. But I think all of these solutions are in play, and I think young foresters can be a major force in actually driving a paradigm shift there.
Yeah, thanks very much, Kim. Yeah, I think you know, the business case now is that sustainability has to happen. The resources, you know, the long-term management plans didn't have as many contingencies to deal with the issues of climate change, and specifically in Canada, we have, you know, a massive beetle dieback, which is caused, of course, by increasing drought and increasing temperatures as well. So I think the business case is also naturally kind of moving in that direction, where sustainability has to be at the forefront of the conversation. Do any of our other panelists want to respond?
I'm sorry if I talk too much, but I just want to bring the different generations. When I started from talking about forestry, we talk about productivities, timbers, yeah, how to make benefit of the forest. But I'm sure when we talk about forest now and involving the young forester here, I would say it's more or less it's about shifting the role of forester, using the technologies, digital device, applications, think out of the box than the old generation like I have thought about. Yeah, so meaning that getting the social medias involved in the process, digital, telecommunication, distant communication, and so on. Yeah, being the innovative thinking, and now you can see that people use a lot of apps to monitor the forest area, like our speaker here talking about using the number. Yeah. So I think that is the generation that I have observed. So that's why the young forester can bring that up. And I'm sure it will bring a new chapter of the sustainable forest management for our planet.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. No, I do agree. I think we have a role as young people to be more bold and push our decision makers and our politicians to be more aggressive in how they form policy. But I think there's an incredible role for civil society to play in pushing, in enforcing that agenda, right? In using those social media messaging to point to the crisis that we have in many of these resources. And I think it's also very important to note that as young people, not all of us are very advanced in our use of technology, but there's an awful lot of potential for geospatial Earth observation systems. I mean, the data is there, the tools and technologies are there, and it's sort of in our hands to use as we will. But I think that the important thing is that data is just an enabler. And so it's actually about putting the data in the hands of the decision makers and the managers to manage better.
Before we go to the next question, let's get Nina on the line.
Oh yeah, great.
Hi, this is Amina. Sorry, I was hoping to answer this question. I have actively participated in an agroecological research in Germany where we were looking at how do we reduce this ecological crisis and ensure we also achieve the economical gains from the land use systems. And we've seen like very actively young people who are coming up with very innovative ecopreneurial ideas, and they were trying to also help the young foresters were helping model and design how they should be laying it down on the ground in the various configurations, as well as the market people. Like we have different expertise who are helping out, be it in implementation, be it in the laying out, be it also in what investment should they be bringing on board so that they continue to ensure the forest is intact, or whatever the trees are there, the shrubs are there, and the animals are there, so that they can also get that. And it was really motivating to see that. And that's what I had borrowed from there, and now trying to see how beekeeping and as well as what do you call agroforestry trees being sold for the production here in the drylands of Kenya. And it's really trying to take up in terms of that. So not only being brought to design, but also taking something back with them, that they also are getting some what do you call ideas of investment ideas from there, and some have even started implementing that, so they can play a double role of being investors and as well as what do you call being advice givers as professionals to those who are already doing the activity.
Yeah, thanks very much, Amina. You and I discussed or at least exchanged on social media last week. I was actually up in the drylands of Kenya in around the Chulu Hills area. And I think exactly what you say is certainly true. The youth and young people in these ecosystems are very driven to not only conserve, but restore their homelands. But they need economic opportunities, right? So they need livelihoods opportunities. Otherwise, unfortunately, the pull of the city, and so most often it's the fallacy of the city, draws them in. They do need jobs, they do need employment. And so I think we need to begin thinking creatively about how rural forests and rural economic development can keep those innovative entrepreneurial youth in those spaces to begin to actually conserve their forests. Yeah, we have another question from the floor.
So I have a question for Hyung, if I pronounce your name. So as we are talking, like as he mentioned, and as Amina, we were talking about like getting youth into action. So my question to you is, because you work with a lot of data and lots of numbers, so you might have noticed, like there are so many pressing issues that don't have data on, and which it would be very, important that if you could, do research on it to make certain solutions. So what are some observations of such areas that you have noticed that youth can just go and be a part of that solution, or just bring all those data from, especially from the regions of the world, like Abdullah mentioned, where there are like really pressing issues of climate change already, or forestry issues already coming out?
Well, if I have to list all the data that's missing, I'm gonna spend like a week. But just focusing on the field that I've been working on, which was the illegal timber, illegally sourced timber products. Actually, how to say, like, you know, I've been working with the national statistics mainly. So we actually outsourced collecting data part to another company. The company collects all the statistics from the official government websites. But even then, you know, if you think about official government data, you may feel that, oh, it's like official, it has to be reliable, but in fact, it's not. So there is a huge gap between the countries. So that's a huge thing. And also, I'm from Korea, I'm from South Korea. And even in Korea, I realized that the detail of the information is quite missing. So let's say we import a lot of paper or like a log from the different countries. So once we get them inside the country, we don't know how it's distributed. Like, but we need to know who's consuming the most, and you know, just to see what's the source of a certain kind of I would say the change or something. But then it's not monitored, even though it must be really easy to just track the route of one log from the source forest to the ending part. And even, yeah, so it's just that we couldn't really think before that data, to use data effectively. I think like we've been yeah, so that's one thing. And one thing that I really wanted to mention was that in illegal timber products, there's also an issue of accessibility of the data, because in some countries, in tropical countries, they do collect. There's a technology where if you extract the DNA from a timber, then you can track where this tree is from, like which country or which region of the country. So because all the ecosystems have different DNA in theory. So in some parts, they've been collecting those data, but then it's done by some universities, institutes, and then they've been collecting some data from this forest, and some others are doing on that forest, and those are not connected. So those are really sparse. And because they were funded by a certain organization or government, whatever, and they want to keep their data in their own, and they're not opening into the world. So it was interesting that one day, like people were saying, oh, there's no data, but then, oh, this person is saying, oh, actually we have the data, but then you're not opening, and they don't want to open it. Like they're saying, oh, it's important that we have the platform where we share all the information about this DNA information, but then eventually they don't want to open it. So the transparency and accessibility of the data is also a big issue.
Yeah, that's certainly something that most folks have been privy to in their careers, is this data war, and who's willing to provide the data that they have, because that data becomes power in a way, which is rather interesting. It is interesting to see the new tools and technologies to acquire data. And I actually wanted to move the question to the policy end. When we have imperfect data, how important is it then to work with people to fill in the gaps through storytelling?
It's interesting you would ask that, because as my colleague was talking, that's the same thing that came to mind, because we do still have to have the policies in place. We still have to have the legislation, but we are often challenged when there is no data to drive that. And so what you find is that you then have to rely on the traditional knowledge, or you have to rely on the community's information and inputs in terms of how it is that you can get action and get policies that support the work that needs to be done. And so we found a lot of that happening, where it is the traditional knowledge, it is information that is just generally, but not necessarily data specific information or sector specific information that we have to use. A lot of time we have to rely on best practices. We have to look at what is happening in the region as well. If there's no data specific to Jamaica, as a tropical, we have to look at our neighbors. So we look a lot at what's happening in Guyana. We look at a lot at what's happening in Costa Rica, countries around us, to sort of help us to drive our policies and our planning.
I think we have another question from the crowd. Is that right?
Hey. Thanks, everyone. And I want to say that it's really awesome to be an event that is not only with young professionals on the panel who are showcasing how there are youth contributing to the sector and actually have a lot of expertise. I think often in forestry, youth are seen as external too. The youth themselves are representing themselves as people wanting to come into the forest sector, and the forest sector is suggesting that we are willing to engage and invite them in. But I think it's really nice to, one, see young panelists who show that we've got experts to diversify the look of our panels, but also I'd like to commend the organizers who are also a group of young professionals. So this is great. So I'm just out of curiosity, and I kind of want to bring it back to maybe a more personal level, so forgive me for doing so. So for the young at heart panelists, what did your network look like when you were in, say, your early to mid 30s? Like, what was your engagement in the forest sector? How visible were you? What was your networking like? And for the young professionals, how often do you have opportunities like this to showcase your expertise? And is this something that regularly happens within your organizations? And maybe another question for the young at heart, how often do your organizations promote your young professionals in events to give them opportunities like this? Thanks.
Well, thinking about my time, if I have to write a letter to my girlfriend, it takes me like 5 days to reach the destination. And now you just take. Thinking about the technologies in that time. So talking about the networking, yeah, it's quite limited, I would say. But yeah, we hang around among the forester. But as I said, that well, it's quite a common perception during that time. Let's talk about like when I was 30s, still forest had to be managed by forester. Yeah, that's quite common perception during that time. But then when the climate change hit, that changed the world. Yeah, meaning the forest is not among the forester anymore. The forest has to bring the connection with other elements of the society. So that's why we start thinking about networking, not only among the forester, but agriculture, other type of land use, fishery. Yeah, and then talking about the forest ecosystem itself, well, we can hang around with the watershed practitioners, mangrove. So that become kind of vertically across and horizontally across. So that start thinking about the networking. I think the term networking that Elaine asked me, it came like about 20 years ago, not at my age of 30. Yeah, I would say. So it came very recent. We talk about exchange of ideas, but now you have a lot of opportunities. So that's why I'm saying that the technologies allow you to reach out and even learn more new things from other continents within like this. Very quick. The thing is that how can you manage those knowledge and information and how you interpret those for the positive impact? Yeah, so that's why I mentioned what would be the role of the young forester to do. I would say, and also who are accountable for engaging with the youth. I would say everyone, but taking different version of roles in terms of the spectrum. So thanks for that question. I hope that I answer you, Ellen.
Other reflections?
Well, I guess I'm the other young at heart. So, I mean, I didn't hide away out in a forest. I mean, you can't do that in Denmark really because we have so little of it and it's also well managed and, well, maybe well managed is not the right word, but very carefully managed. What I was working on was mainly actually organizations together with other youth. So I was very active in the student movement, not about forestry, but about all sorts of other things. And then when I left my university career or work, I went into NGO work, also working in an organization and feeling actually I got loads of opportunity, even though I was relatively young at the time. So I think that notion of actually working together in organizations to create that voice of youth, I think that in itself is crucially important. Not to sort of just try on your own to do something, but get together with others to learn from each other, to get different perspectives into your work, and to try and find ways to actually engage with others who can then create new opportunities for you, which I think is very, very doable. We as an organization are very interested in engaging with youth. As I said earlier, I mean, our membership group is aging in very many ways, and we would like to see other perspectives and working with organized youth in actually getting that perspective into the conversation, because like we work with indigenous peoples who bring a different perspective, we'll work with women's group who bring a different perspective. I'm absolutely convinced that youth group will also bring a different perspective. Those three may be the same, or they may have some notes in common, but I think these are distinct voices that we would like to engage much more with. And that, I think, would lead to opportunities like this one for people younger than me.
So I guess the voice from
Yeah.
so your question was like, if I had any chances to showcase my work, I think in the official situations with the organization, no, because I think it's like divided roles. I mean, not in a negative way, because my boss or my bosses, they are more experienced in communicating the work, because my work can be sometimes politically sensitive, and I don't have the, and I'm kind of technician. So yeah, maybe they have better skills and knowledge or experience in it. So I think maybe some other young professionals might not like that, but it's like in my case, in my team. So in many cases in official situations they do, but I love sharing different stories, not just mine, but from other people. So in my case, I usually use my networks to invite others, including seniors, and what is it like? Young in her people. It's just like any audience, and share each other's work and stories. So that's my kind of stage. So I think I've been making that kind of opportunities myself.
Oh, so yeah, for me, I think I don't have so much opportunities, but I think I made it. Like, I just opened the paths. This is, for example, the first time I am in this space sharing with us. But yeah, I think that first we all, like, I don't know why, I think in bubbles, you know, in this, I'm going to take my mask off. When we met, or we meet in, I don't know, showcases, we are also in bubbles. Like, this is a bubble where we all understand about forests, and then we are in bubbles of youth, for example, of activism, where we can enter as youth but not as adults, and then it creates a barrier and a difference. In my work, when I travel, I develop workshops. So I think that's one way to showcase the project, because you don't have always to talk, to express, or to share what you do. So last week before coming here, I traveled to a rural city in my country, and we have a workshop there to share our methodology, transformation action in a national educational event. So yeah, it was, I don't know, it was excited. I was excited because at the last, people like the director of institutes of educational institute asked me for photos, and I was like, yeah, okay. But I mostly believe in connection. So as a social person, I think I share my experience among friends, and that's kind of crossing the bubbles, and you can make the diverse roles about, I don't know, person that just are not just focusing on forest. And also in social media, it's the best way, you know, sharing not what you are working for, but what you want to work in the future. You share where you want to be, so people contact you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Esteban, and the rest of the panelists for responding. I think your response about not having enough experience, I always find that funny because it's sort of this chicken and egg thing, right? Are you ever going to get enough experience if those opportunities are not put in front of you? It's not like that experience will magically appear and then you'll be ready. And I also think that the more that I've engaged kind of in these spaces, I don't think I've ever gotten to the point where I've got, oh, I know enough now. You know, rather I'm still curious, but I think you're always sort of stumbling through and trying to figure it out. And that's the way it should. I think those organizations and institutions that provide those opportunities for their young professionals, in the end, will be the ones that are rewarded, right? The young professionals will develop and will only just strengthen the vision and the implementation of that institution. So I think we have five minutes left, around 5 minutes left before we wrap up. So to end the Ask Me Anything section, we're going to go to this final question. It's forward looking. So each of the panelists, if you could take 20 to 30 seconds to reflect on this, in your view, how do you see the future of the forestry sector? So we'll take a couple seconds, and then maybe whoever's ready to go first, you can step to the mic.
I think especially as I am the strategic planner, I will take a stab at it. In my view, I see the future of the forest sector as bright and diverse. In my country, for example, when a few years ago, the forest sector, the forestry agencies were a part of a government ministry, or they were under the Ministry of Environment. The Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Environment and Land. Recently, the forest sector has moved to a ministry that's titled Economic Growth and Job Creation. And I think that in itself shows that while we acknowledge that forests are important to our environment, they're much more than just boxed into, you know, environmental action or environmental related policies and action, because forests, they affect and inform everything, life. You know, at our agency, we sought to have that tagline, forest equals life. And so for me, I see the forest sector as critical to every area, to health. We've seen in the opening ceremony, for example, at this very conference, just the impact of pandemics and the roles that forests play in stemming and curbing the effects of pandemics. So it affects health, it affects livelihoods, it affects food security. Forests are in everything. And so when I think about the forest sector, I think about a future that is bright and that will involve several key players. You will have roles and responsibilities for every kind of job, every kind of skill set in that sector. And that's really how I see it.
Thank you. Kim?
Well, I think it's important to note that over the past 20 years, I think forestry as managing forests productively has become, I think, increasingly marginalized, because it's not in most countries a very important sector. Many other sectors are way more important. And when you look then at the forest problems that have come up big time, they are not caused by forestry generally. They are caused by agriculture, expansion, and urbanization, and all these other things. So I think there's been a marginalization, but I think the trend is shifting now in the sense that forests are becoming seen as more important, not just for the productive economy, but for all sorts of other values that they have: climate change, biodiversity, all of these things, also as a social good. So I think there is a possibility and a great opportunity that forestry in the more holistic perspective, will actually become a much more important area of work than it has been over the past 20 years, and therefore will be much more important with a lot of opportunity for young professionals in the years to come.
Yeah, certainly the diversification away from pure production to everything that we see now, climate, the social element, it certainly opened up the door for what professionals can take on now. Either one of you want to jump in? Yeah.
Actually, I'm in line with your idea that, you know, like it's been really, really diversified. And I think the forest sector is going to be really, really colorful in the future because it's not just, you know, forests is our homes. We're not living in the oceans. Like this is the land, and also the types of the forest has been really diversified a lot. Like nowadays, we also talk about urban forests, and many of us have been maybe from the urban context, and so these diversification of the forms also brings some new opportunities in dealing with some issues, the challenges that those forests are facing. So there are always problems, like along the history, there'll be more and more problems as the world is getting complicated. So I think there'll be a lot of work to do for many foresters. Yeah.
Ron?
Yeah, I'd like to echo what Ken mentions. Yeah, well, over the 40 years experience working in forestry topic. Well, from the cynical side, I would say I'm very upset seeing the issue remain the same. I participated in the World Forestry Congress for probably more than 10 Congress. I see the same issue, but because it was marginalized. Yeah, no attention from other sectors. I like to echo what Ellen mentions. I like to congratulate the organizers to bring different people's different perspective, not only among the young foresters to join in these communities. That is a great opportunity. I still see hope that we bring their perspective from other sectors, not only talking about forestry among foresters, but we bring in other perspective to see how to shape the forest for life. So that's why I see future for the young generation, but we have to work together.
That's fun.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I have hope also for a brighter future, but that hope means also action, a lot of effort. I think it's like the hope moves us for action, and the action also impulses the hope until we reach the harmony between all the living beings. But for that, I think we need accessibility. For that, we need to transform our model, to understand some things, to learn, to build others. But yeah, I think we gotta hurry a little bit, but yeah, just align our head, our heart, and our hands in our work. Do the things that we are meant to do, and be a role model, just because it's, I think, the unique way of teaching.
Thank you. And Amina, if we still have you on the line, let's give you the last word on this question. In your view, how do you see the future of the forestry sector?
Thank you. I'm a very optimistic person, and I feel that the forestry sector will be a vibrant one that will be dominated by young professionals who have been very resilient and display exceptional leadership skills that will enhance more uptake, benefit, and diversity and diversified skills. And also commercialization will be promoted through private-public sector collaborations, and also it will lobby for more female participation in this male-dominated sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Amina. A very hopeful message from everyone. I mean, words I heard were hope, opportunity, colorful, forest equals life, transformative, although recognizing that there has to be an element of urgency tied to it if we want to make change. At this point, I think we'll quickly share some of our reflections on the session very quickly. I had 4 take-home messages. One being that all of you are coming from very different backgrounds. And what was funny is that each one of you prefaced what you didn't bring to the table. You're not a forester. You're not a forester or a sociologist. I think you called yourself the weird one, not a sociologist, not a forester. What I'm hearing is that if we can leverage these differences as strengths, we're all the faces of forestry. And I don't think we have to preface what we aren't. We are all contributing to the forest sector in a meaningful way. 2, it was made very clear that people cannot be separated from nature. And I think as youth and as young professionals moving forward in the sector, that is something that we have to bear in mind at all points. Thirdly, we need to value lived experiences. And I think that's how we can advance youth and in this profession is listening and hearing to what they have to say and valuing the perspectives that they bring. And 4th, there's something that you actually mentioned. You mentioned something that along the lines of sometimes we don't have the solution. And I think that's a really important thing to reflect on for all of us. Not having the solution is okay. What's important is that we are transparent in our dialogue, that we listen with empathy, actively listen, and are willing to engage with other viewpoints and values so that we can create change where everyone gets on board behind a common mission. So those are my 4 take-home reflections quickly.
Wonderful, thanks, Dana. Mine are very similar. And I'm going to try and interpret my scribbling here, so bear with me. Since everyone else confessed, I also have to confess. I'm actually a soil scientist, not a forester. So since you all said what you're not, I'll also bring that to the table. I think one thing that I took away was, we need people to fall back in love with forests, right? And I think when I in Bonn and I walked past the FSC building, all of these kids, all the nidos or the sort of child daycare centers, most often they're kind of modeled after forests. I find that very funny. Right, that if you believe in evolution, we are arboreal species that came into the grasslands, and that somehow at some point in our history we are, we do love forests, and so it's part of our role to communicate and have people fall back in love with those forests. But I think the diversity of entry points now is really interesting, and it's exhibited by the panel today. But I think in all of our and it'd be great if we had more time to hear from those who have been in this space for a while. But in my workspace, it's exceptionally diverse, and I think that brings so much strength to the industry. In BC, specifically in Vancouver, there are stories of forest families, right? Son after son after son who was in the forest sector. I think the year that I graduated from UBC, it was more women than it was men. And I think that's just an ode to the diversity and the expansion of the forest sector, which I think bodes very well for the future of its management. The next thing that I had scribbled down here was people at the center. And I think that's so key, right? Maybe, Kim, we should have all done sociology degrees, because I think as I'm moving through my career, I'm realizing more and more how much of my job, how much of the success of my projects is bound on how we're able to engage stakeholders, how we're able to speak to them and understand power dynamics, and how we're able to have dialogues like this to be able to understand for them what's a success, right? Because that's going to be ever changing. And if you go back to that same community 5 years from now, there's going to be a new definition of success. And so it's probably the most expensive, the most time consuming to engage those communities, but I do believe it's going to be the most rewarding and the thing that will create long-term sustainable change. And then the last thing that I took away from this is we should talk about our passions. I think so often the message around forests, rightfully so, because of the urgency of the challenges that are at our doorstep, is the negative stuff, how quickly they're being lost, how much biodiversity is being lost. And I think there's also this view that we all got into the sector as martyrs. We're stepping up to the challenge to solve these problems. But I think from your stories and also from my own stories, I got into the space because I'm passionate about forests, and I'm passionate about wildlife, and I'm passionate about people. And I think those passions are really where the innovative solutions lie. And so if we lean into the passions rather than always the challenges, I think a lot of good can come from that. So those are my 3 wrap-ups. I'm going to hand over to the organizers to play a final video.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. And thank you so much to our moderators and our panelists as well for sharing your stories. As Dana alluded to, she mentioned the faces of forestry. Also, I just realized I didn't introduce myself. I'm sorry. My name is Jen. I'm one of the youth organizers for this event, and I'm part of the youth delegation for the WFC this year. So we came up with a campaign idea to share more stories about people who are in forestry or forest-related sectors. And we're very excited because we were able to scramble together with our lovely photographer, videographer here, Cece, a video that showcases the stories of everyone in the, well, not everyone, but of the youth in the forestry world.
Okay, yes, so well, now that everyone is confessing, I will also confess I'm not a forester. I'm an environmental scientist, and now I'm into studying ecosystem services. I'm Vinamra Mathur. I'm one of the organizers as part of Youth for Nature. I'm the Asia Pacific Regional Director, and forests are very close to my heart, and I've always lived in them and been around them. So thank you everyone for joining, and thank you everyone for coming to this session. We do have a surprise even for our online audience. A lot of Youth for Nature global ambassadors, some of who are here today, are watching online, and we can include the video. It's called Faces of Forestry, and we can have a watch.
I'm a face of forest. I'm a face of forest.
I am a face of
Sorry.
I am a face of forestry.
I am a face of forestry.
I am a face of forestry.
I'm a face of forestry.
I am a face of forestry.
Hello, my name is Afsana Kafle and I am originally from Nepal.
Hi, I'm Vinamra Mathur. I'm from India.
Hi, I'm Terry Reichland and I'm based in Switzerland.
Hi, my name is Hubert and I'm from the Philippines.
Hello, my name is Susan Lee. I'm from South Korea.
My name is Utiwe Champon Boachi.
Hi, my name is Jessica Vega Ortega. I am from Mexico, from Mixteco people.
Hello, my name is Esteban Barrega. I am 25 years old and I am from Quito, Ecuador.
My name is Namiro Sarah Amina. I'm 24 years old and I'm from Uganda.
My name is Jaya Setiawan Gulo and people used to call me by Gulo.
Hello, my name is Anali. I'm from Argentina.
Hi everyone, I'm Leila from Lebanon.
The forest in 3 words would be sustainability, wisdom, and harmony.
Forest therapy. Second is give youth more opportunities. And third is about international forestry.
We equip, empower, and educate youth and young people.
Well, I would say that my work is about passion, it's about organization, and too much love.
All right, I believe that my work is impactful, fun, and engaging.
Maps, resources management, and information dissemination.
Climate and forestry researcher and advocate.
Finance, communication, and world.
Inspiration, engagement, and action.
I'm a forest communicator and we help raise awareness and spread the word about what's happening about forests all around the world.
Powerful, help us, also management the ideas.
My work is basically relating science to society.
I work in 6 communities around the Ecuadorian Choco Andino forest, one of the most biodiverse forests in the world. I developed these projects to boost the livelihoods of all the living beings in the territory as a resilient act against extractivist activities that threaten our country.
My work impact to motivated to youth who lives in Korea and has their major in forest.
I think that my work have a big impact on a personal level, but also for my circle and my community, because forests matter for all of us and it's important for all the forms of life in the world.
So what I do is that I try to see the possible means we can relate forestry to solving the triple planetary crisis as outlined by the United Nations. But how can we use this basic science to address the challenges and the crises we face in contemporary times? And that is where my work comes in.
My work helps people improve the urban canopy in their cities.
I think coming from a resource-rich country, it is very vital for us, foresters and communicators, to understand all these resources that matter and play a vital role in our daily lives.
Well, as a climate researcher, the forestry sector is really a crucial part of forestry, of climate change, because of the roles it plays in adaptation and mitigation in climate change. And I'm also an advocate of action in climate change through forestry pathways, and that goes a long way.
The impact will be for the nation. That's how we are going to uplift the social economic for the poor people, and how we are going to collect the tax fairly, and how we are going to manage the state budget in Indonesia.
I'm trying to revoice forestry as a potential career for youth and for the coming generation. I'm trying my best to build it forestry, which is considered important, but also to be considered very important sector or a future sector that people can actually pursue a career.
So as a forest communicator, what we do is help connect man back to nature. And we just try to get as many people as possible to know more about forests. And it's really important because you cannot protect something unless you know a lot about it and you feel like you belong there.
Contribute to open the spaces for more voices for indigenous youth, and also try to put in the agendas the perspective of the indigenous people.
The forest sector, especially the urban forest sector, is important to me because I care about where we live, and more than half the people today live in urbanized areas.
I feel forestry has a lot of the answers that we're looking for. The sector in itself is very diverse and has the aspects of the companies, the governments, and the solutions. So we need to work towards in finding these solutions.
Forest is very important for myself and for everyone, because we can breathe the oxygen from the trees, from the forest, and the forest is the lung of the world. And without forest, there will be no creators living on earth.
Personally, I love the trees, but also the trees is the connection for the energy, and also is the culture, but the more important is human rights.
Well, the forest sector is very important for me because I'm working on that. And in my country, there are few opportunities for people who is starting in this field. So I think we have a lot of work to do yet.
For me, the forest is a space of peace, is surrounded by wisdom, by ineffable wisdom that just cannot be explained by words.
I think forest is very important, but it's non-economical things. So yeah, I want people knows about how it's value, how it is valuable.
The forest for me looks like home because they are giving us all the things that the humanity needs to be safe and to be healthy.
The forest looks to me is like an interconnected web of life, because I think all forests in the world are interconnected in some way to life through the animals, the people, the environment, the air we breathe. It all goes to the forest has an impact on everything. So to me, it's an interconnection of everything we are on this earth.
The forest to me looks like a place where you can call home, a place where you will have all the answers to most of the world's issues.
Yeah, I think we all need to refound and rehear the song of the forest again.
I think a forest should look like something or a place where everything can live harmoniously, and that we will be able to harness its power and its benefits for a sustainable livelihood.
A future forest that I imagine look like to me as a potential career sector that is safe, inclusive, and that is for everyone.
Well, the forest looks like home, simply.
I am a face of forestry. I'm a face of forestry.
I am a face of forestry.
I'm a face of forestry.
I am a face of forestry.
I am a face of forestry.
I am a face of forestry.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I think I recognize some of those faces in the room, so great job, everyone. Yeah, I just want to take a moment really to thank our panelists for showing up, for staying late, but really for your vulnerability, for your openness to sharing your stories, because I think it really has impacted many of us. And I think let's commit to doing this again. Let's not wait till the next World Forestry Congress. Let's continue these dialogues. And Esteban, as you said, let's be the bridge back to our communities, wherever they may be. Can I actually ask everyone to just join me in giving our panelists a round of applause? And of course, a big thanks to all of you for your participation as well. The event, of course, couldn't have happened tonight without the work of many of the people working behind the scenes. And also, we'd like to express our gratitude to many of the sponsors for this event. So a special word of thanks to Youth for Nature, the Forest Stewardship Council, the Forest Products Association of Canada, University of Toronto School of Forestry, and Chop Value.
Great. And I would just echo what you said. Thank you so much for your storytelling. I think that is one of the most powerful ways to share knowledge is through storytelling. So thank you. This is one of many youth-related events at the World Forestry Congress this year. We encourage everyone to join in on Thursday for a number of events that we're having, or youth-related events that we're having, and to submit your stories to the Living Library campaign. Also, there will be a recorded version of this available by the end of the week on the WFC campaign and Youth for Nature channels. So be sure to check those out if you want to tune in again and listen to what we said. Once again, thank you everyone in person, online, our panelists, and Amina for staying up late and sticking it out for this. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, engaging in this conversation. Thank you to you, the audience, for your thoughtful questions and thoughtful dialogue as well. Enjoy your evening, enjoy the rest of the Congress, and thanks again.